Settle in, class. It's time to walk through the amazing creatures you can play as in Pathfinder. And if you're into D&D, you'll want to stick around if nothing else to steal. This was supposed to be a D&D versus Pathfinder video, but you'll get why it's not pretty quickly. We have a lot to cover, even just going over the core. So are you ready to see what happens when what you are matters? Then let's go. Pathfinder has 48 ancestries, which act as your character species. Each one also gets a heritage, a subcategory based on blood, blessing, or behavior that gives you extra benefit. There's also 19 generic ones for being part dragon or someone's living reflection, but this time we're keeping it basic. Today we're talking about the core ancestries, but let me know if you want to hear about the really fun ones, like Shuni or Konrasu or Galoma. Let's start with a baseline for many of you, the human. Now humans are something we already know, so physical description gets glossed over and society just says that you're in constant flux compared to most other major players. We'll always see edicts, which act like personal morals or goals, and anathema, which are opposites you avoid. Common human edicts are things like exploration, striving for greatness, or devoting oneself to a moral cause. Their anathema is a resounding wasting your life. And Galarian humans are even more aware of how short life is, but Paizo makes sure that every creature feels special, even humans. They're versatile, adaptable, bond easy, and spread everywhere. They explore, go to war, try to leave a mark on life just because they can. In other systems, humans are neutral because they're a blank slate, but in Pathfinder it's because they invest in so many places they're just rounded out. They start with 8 HP, get an extra point in 2 abilities of their choice, have the standard 25 movement speed, and no common and 1 other language. But since humans don't have a native language, they just get to choose. The other ancestries respect your adaptability, but are on their guard because they don't know what to expect from you. As per their heritage, you'll find some familiar sights if you play D&D. Some humans have extra skills, or extra feats, or cold resistance from the blood of Baba Yaga flowing through their veins. You know, standard stuff. They don't have that many options since half-elf and orc are generic now, but they do have a whopping 42 exclusive feats. Every ancestry gets by with increasing strength because this is an important part of your character. You might draw power from your ancestors using traditions or spirits or the blood of a dragon. Humans can adapt anywhere, so you might have dark vision or a swim speed or even fly for a moment. You might have stolen magic or weapon skills that you really shouldn't be able to know, and there's options for general feats or knowledge or skill bonuses because humans can't leave well enough alone. Some specialize in wit for diplomacy and sudden bonuses, or get so prideful they're uncontrollable. But with all ancestries, a major theme binds them all together. Humans are a persistent and adaptable pack species. Plenty of your options are for aiding others and working with them, or resisting fatigue or dying. But your level 17 option, the pinnacle for your species, is heroic presence. You inspire 10 people with faith in the group, granting temporary HP and extra willpower. With teamwork and adapting and never giving up, the human spirit can go toe-to-toe with all these longer-lived ancestries. They made the human, the notorious boring blank slate, actively inspiring. The option to grab an extra feat and things from all over is still there, but these aren't just the default you play when you don't have an idea. They're an option you're debating on for flavor. Given what it's working with, I want to give it extra credit, which I will because these are being graded. This makes me feel something, my brain whirring with possibilities. A hack hunter covered in tattoos, born of ancient witches, the awakened child of a lost civilization with ancient mystic ways, a wild explorer excitedly delving anywhere dangerous and unknown, or a hyperactive anime protagonist who never gives up and just won't die. Now they aren't flawless, some of their feats are relatively underwhelming. Like the power of friendship speech is nice, but the kitsune can turn into a flaming house-sized box monster and the skeleton becomes a bone tornado. So I don't really care that much about power, mostly just flavor, and they do feel like something I want. So in my books, this is a solid A. Now one thing that they won't tell you here is that humans not only have cities everywhere, but one ancestry loves to live alongside them. On their own, halflings will rarely build more than a village. Most of them just wander too much, they like meeting new people. They're also usually pretty peaceful. The biggest war they have is the conflict of wanting adventure versus just wanting to relax in their nightgown all night. They're curious and cheerful and optimistic, and most people just love having them around. People also think they're lucky, but tend to dismiss them. That's actually perfect, and they play into it. They keep their names short and humble, favor service jobs and manual labor, and weave themselves into other cultures easily. It gets them opportunities, indulging their curiosity, or even mischief. Most importantly, it helps them stand up to oppressors, and they favor gods of freedom just as much as luck or trickery. But at the heart of it, the ideal for a halfling is just good food, bad laughs, and nice friends. Just don't take your luck for granted. They only have 6 HP, and they might be dexterous and wise, but they aren't usually strong. The key word there is usually. Ancestries either have 2 bonuses with no weakness, or 3 with 1. However, there's now an alternative option for anyone to have the human-style 2 bonuses of their choice. So if you want to be a halfling or gnome barbarian without penalty, go ahead. Anyway, halflings are great at finding anyone who's hiding with their keen eyes. Some are even more observant through their heritage, gaining extra perception or low light vision. That means they see fine in shadows and candlelight, but can't see in actual darkness. That's actually the most common vision that half the ancestries have. Anyway, your heritage can grant you new languages, let you power through emotions or difficult terrain, but my favorite are the Jinxed and Hillock. Jinxed halflings can curse people with clumsiness, but can't take any of the halfling lucky feats. The Hillock halflings are shyer ones who get extra HP when resting or when having a snack while being patched up by a healer's kit. Behold the healing power of second breakfast. Anyway, the feats also play into these ideas. Some become lucky folk heroes with special halfling weapons, rerolling failures and fighting off fear. Most are great at blending into society, noticing missteps and improving allies and grabbing a feat from the people they grew up with. Some use that skill sneakily, hiding hiding messages and folk sayings and blending into crowds and making sure they will never be captured. While halflings generally like to help, not everyone gives them a choice, which is why they're generally sneaky. They'll slip out of binds and knocks, sneak like few others, and their pinnacle power is banishing. They can go invisible for a minute while choosing a place people think they slipped off to. That guaranteed misdirection takes away the main problem with invisibility. They can't just lob a lightning bolt at where you were. These were gonna be a tier list, but what flaw am I supposed to find? This is basically any sort of halfling you could want to be, from hero to homebuddy to subversive trickster, all wrapped up neatly. Make a bartender who runs a speakeasy, a servant whose cheerfulness keeps their liege happy while quietly keeping her threats in check. Maybe you're a folk hero who's piled up favors, and everyone knowing you isn't always good. I played a dragon hunting monk back in first edition, and this gives me the itch to do it again. Maybe this time he won't end up confused and sad because he wanted a glorious death. Punching dragons wasn't supposed to keep working, but I already went through the trouble of making the graphics, so how about which I'm more likely to play? In that case, we'll bump humans down to B and halflings A. Humans inspire me, but I like being small. Now enough of the quiet farmers, let's make those crops come to light with the Leshy, everyone's favorite plant people, and basically Pathfinder's Eevee, by which I mean there are tons of options and they're so cute they're a secondary mascot. They seriously have a feat for being so cute that you can get the drop on people or make dumb requests without them holding it against you. I mean, after all, you're just a little guy. By which I mean you're an ancient nature spirit inhabiting a gnome-sized plant body. They don't really remember anything, but that's the point, they can re-experience life. They're usually made by druids who learn from powerful nature spirits and tend to stick with the creator for a while. They're completely independent and like being travel guides and messengers for guardians. They're also usually curious and become attached to people easily. Others assume that they only know nature, but they actually really like cities. They just want them to get along with nature. Their own society is about loyalty and trusting friends. After all, they don't really have blood relatives, so found family is kind of their whole thing. You'll notice that most of these core ancestries are really loyal, but that's why they're the most common adventurers. Trusting your teammates is pretty important. Anyway, if you take care of them and the nature they guard, most will have your back until the end. They know common and fey and are wise and hardy, but a little bit dumb. They also have low light vision. Now what I love are the names because they change. Some change with their goals or personality, like Verdant Tailweaver to Lurking Hunter. Others will just be something they like Cascading Rapids or Waving Field. But my favorites are ones who change in a cycle alongside nature. And I know what you're thinking, Scarlet in Summer to Wistful in Autumn, but how about Noon Sky to Evening Song? Maybe you're a kelp plushie that goes with the tide, or a cactus one that depends on the rain. There are 12 broad categories to choose from. Cactus and root are great at brawling. Vine, leaf, pine, seaweed, and lotus have options for movement. Chrysanthemum and fruit let you eat part of them for healing or resistance. And fungus, gourd, and peach child are weird. Gourd can store things inside their head for quick access. Peach child looks like a kid and can talk to animals, and fungus is a fungus. They can also see in the dark. Now that is a lot of options because they can be any plant or fungi. And then you mix and match the feats to make your exact plant. Shoot seeds, photosynthesize better, anchor with roots, heal after fire damage, shower spores or poison. Your plant nature also lets you grow or hide or call on other plants for help. You can also rely on being a spirit, calling on your past lives for knowledge or other spirits to defend you. And for your pinnacle, you have 3 options reflecting this. Flourish and Ruin lets you pin people with plants while healing your allies. Regrowth makes you or an ally regenerate, constantly healing and being near unable to die unless hit with fire or acid. And Return to the Seed lets you leave behind a seed if killed. If planted and watered, the next morning you are reborn. I don't know what more you could want, to be honest. If you want to be a little plant person, this is just P. I'm shocked at myself that it's only A tier. My only real hangup is they don't have a carnivorous plant option, which is weird because flytrap leshies exist. I know they eat whatever the vessel would, but ripping apart bodies can't be the hangup because the fungi exist. This is still great. They've got more options than you could dream, from a gremlin mushroom devouring everyone to a wonderful little solar funk succulent. But speaking of going green, we should probably get to the elves, who are surprisingly interesting. Their ancient wisdom lets them know to click subscribe and comment which of these ancestries is your favorite.
Wait, we can't see that.
Wait, there's no good way to ask you which you think is best on this one. Comment something about one that surprised you or an idea you've had. YouTube and my ego demand it. Speaking of ego, elves are still the patient, nature-loving creatures you're thinking of, but they're also emotional, curious, idealistic, and most feel lost. When the giant meteors fell and destroyed kingdoms and blotted out the sun for 1,000 years, most of the elves left. They knew it was coming and fled through portals. They finally came back thousands of years later, but sorry, this land is run by the Ancestries who didn't abandon it. They took over some human ruins and scattered to the winds. They're private, passionate, take up all sorts of hobbies, and most importantly, avoid short-lived creatures. Or at least are more reserved about their relationships, because those who aren't get their entire view on lifespan skewed and fall into depression spirals. Turns out that classic elven long view is actually necessary to keep your brain happy for 600 years. People think that they're arrogant and fragile, which is kinda true, but they mainly reserve the arrogance for their rival. Elven society is filled with webs of rivals who tend to get closer over time. It even has its own word, because enemies to friends or lovers is really just that common. They made the elves a shipper's paradise. Their whole society's moral goals are rooting around in other people's business and showing your stupid sexy rival that you're superior. The anathema are abandoning your ways or forcing people to do things. I don't know how these scrawny tsundere think they could. They're the fastest ancestry at 30 feet, which makes them great hunters when combined with that low light vision and dexterity and intelligence. However, despite being taller than humans, they have the lowest HP at 6. Even worse, their flaw is constitution, making them tied with kobolds for the least durable ancestry. At least won't bind them easily. Their bodies slowly change to adapt to their environment. So one raised in the woods might have bark-like skin and green hair. That also comes through in their heritage. They might have a climb speed, or resist hot or cold, or see in the dark with those massive irises. Some might even see the future, or hear incredibly well. And of course, the ancient elves have just been around so long, they used to be another class. They're way out of practice, but they start with the first stage of a multi-class. I guess if you stop adventuring, your level really does go down. Those themes are also the focus of their feats. Learn things, or switch up skills, or get extra bonuses because you're really just resting. Ignore people's threats, or resist emotion, or attack more because of your opinion on short-lived races. Crank up the hatred of your ancient foes to fight off effects or kill demons. Your adaptability matters too, gaining forest magic or climb speeds or switching your heritage to match the environment, but their ultimate ability is a reference to their lore. With them around, teleportation spells can affect more people and be more accurate. Most of the time it's kinda useless, but if you're hopping planets, it can really matter. Yeah, maybe just pick one of the earlier ones for that slot, but other than that, I'm impressed. I don't usually really care about elves, they're just not an archetype I'm really drawn to. There are a few exceptions though, and this is one of them. I'm thinking maybe a lost roamer wearing her broken heart on her sleeve, her rival's gone or unrequited, a romantic whose isolation has left her with odd taste, or maybe a hunter trying to master every environment and skill, using his age to become the Omni-Elf and reclaim their home. But that being said, for me this is a scene. I actually have multiple interesting ideas, which is kind of rare for elves, but I don't really have a strong desire. Still, this being that high is surprising. Enemies to lovers are just a fun trope, though I assume they're supposed to be the same species of enemies because we all know the true opposite is the dwarf, tied for highest HP and slowest speed with great constitution and wisdom. The elves are all about tact, while the dwarven flaw is charisma. Their will and loyalty are as tough as rock and stone, and below the stubborn pride is a fierce love for their family and friends. The dwarves are topside because their empires have fallen. Their god warned them that when those meteors hit, they needed to get to the surface. But they tried killing all the orcs and goblinoids on their way, and eventually we overwhelmed them when they started infighting. Now they're stuck up top in fortresses like the hollowed out mountains called sky citadels. But they mostly get into history because these are exactly what you'd expect. At least they do have some neat cultural quirks, like how they weave their hair in beards and patterns to represent their clans and such. A beard is a sign of maturity that everyone grows. There are a few dwarven clans that are fine with women shaving, but most have beards. And now it's time to see why this is such a beloved ancestry. For heritage, we have 9 options. You could resist fire or poison, or explode with your chosen energy. Your connection with your ancestors can make you harder to knock over, or for undead to touch, or for magic to touch, or might just make you amazing at crafting. But my favorite is the Oathkeeper. You are very honest, and you're good at telling when others aren't. People will trust that you're being truthful a lot easier, but you are horrible at lying. Like a -4 to any roll when you're already bad at charisma. I partially love this because it's one of the many things that has nothing to do with your blood, even if some people think it's a blessing of the truth god. But if you want to see a real blessing, dwarves have the most feat options at 48. Flame guns and gears. The normal weapon feats are cool, but you know the miners need guns and dynamite. They also have ones for their stubbornness, like shoving people around, being really hard to kill, ignoring difficult terrain, or just refusing to be scared, ignoring magical darkness, or just saying no if the DM gets a crit. Of course, there's also plenty for being a better crafter or interacting with rock and stone, like fighting better around it, melting into it to hide, or add to your pinnacle, even turning into it. It's a reaction that makes you immune to spells and effects that target creatures. They also have 2 other pinnacle options. You can either make a passage through any stone wall, or let Torag take the wheel for a better range shot that ignores cover and concealment. I know I went quick, but dwarves get a lot of toys to play with. The straightforward dwarves like this are so common, it's hard for me to come up with an idea that's not a reference. I mean, you probably don't know our shop teacher, Regimir Thundersmith. People always told him he'd crack the sky in half with his crazy experiments. Then a portal opened above his city right after his giant cannon finally worked. He eventually figured out it was just a coincidence, but for a while he was on the run thinking he'd actually shot a hole in the sky. Great guy, but since I'm trying fresh ideas, I thought I'd turn to something they removed from the remaster. The common reasons to adventure section. But it turns out the dwarves are usually just treasure hunters and mercenaries like you'd expect, bringing back resources or recovering treasure and land. I mean, I guess it makes sense, we do love them for their simplicity. So put on some classic mining tunes, have a good meal with an ale or 3, and start digging a hole as a gunslinger hunting for traces of treasure and old heroes. I would be having an S tier time, but for how much I want to play one, C tier. I already spent hundreds of hours being a dwarf elsewhere, so let's look at the other little technical ancestry. Honestly, it is one of my favorites, S tier, right at the top. Here's why. Gnomes just showed up out of the world of Fae, and nobody knows why. They've been around for long enough to mostly lose the Fae type, but their minds are definitely still Fae. They have weird logic, endless curiosity, they get obsessed and change focus all the time, and their minds and feet are constantly moving. They've got near boundless enthusiasm, but people struggle to keep up. And we can't forget how they look. Put that size down to 3 feet after hitting randomize on the character creator, because anything is any color, except for white until the end. The thing is, gnomes have to keep themselves so stimulated. They need new things to dive into passion because they were Fae and will die without whimsy. After 18, they stop aging and only contend with the bleaching. They live until they die of boredom. Their color slowly drains and deep depression sets into a spiral that slowly kills them. The rare gnome who survives this is called a bleachling. They're basically stuck as depressed and angry forever, though pretty wise if you can shake it out of them. Gnomes are hardy and charismatic and physically weak, but otherwise standard. 8 HP, 25 movement, no night vision. Wait a minute, I just love these because they remind me of Changeling the Dreaming, that whole staving off banality with whimsy thing. Anyway, how their Fey blood manifests is the focus of their heritage. Some can change colors for camouflage, or have heightened senses like scent, or draw on shadow fate for dark vision. Some have such strong connections they resist void damage and doom, which is great against undead, and the absolute strongest connections become Fey and get a new cantrip they can change every day. Of course, if you don't want to focus on the Fey, you can focus on your lifestyle for better climbing and swimming, or on any other magic source. Your blood was overridden by a god or magical radiation, and you got a cantrip out of it. And their feats are some of the best. They're just fun. Be a little forest Fey, you can talk to animals or trees, get a familiar, use tricky magic like illusory doubles, or you can use your obsessions to your advantage, always knowing random languages and trivia. And there's all kinds that enhance your heritage, but my favorite is the chameleon gnome rapidly strobing their colors for an RGB flashbang. Some use mundane things in weird ways, like adding traits to your weapons or turning your hair into a nether rope, but perhaps unexpectedly, you also have a tendency for teleportation. I mean, it's not like your ancestors just walked here. Dodge attacks by phasing out of reality, warp around the battlefield, or as your pinnacle feat, just warp to the Fey world. Though my favorite is still the level 1 empathetic flame. If someone you haven't been hostile to tries to hit you, you can use your diplomacy to be like, hey, what did I do? And wreck their roll. It also gets better with diplomacy training, so eventually it could be a -8 to their attack. It's incredibly effective and hilarious, which is honestly just gnomes in general. They're goofy and everywhere and listening to 3 different videos at once, and I love them. Maybe you're trying to map out the world, or this decade's goal is to try every cheese. You can honestly make one a great YouTuber or TikToker, though I feel like that ends up with them arrested, unless you made that the goal and went full Saturday morning cartoon villain with crazy inventions. But they aren't the only clever little creature around here. It's Goblin time! Scrappy and feared, honest and creative, loved and hated, behold our dichotomy. We live in the moment, tell stories, dance and sing and burn. Most of us like to tinker with food or contraptions, or at least new ways to burn or explode. Now, I'm one of the rare ones who do care about history. Most of us don't like it or reading in general, but before you hear our other hates, I need you to think for a second. What do people use to hunt and kill goblins? They send packs of dogs into our warrens and use horses to catch us. So when we consider trusting them a moral failing and make weapons specifically to kill them, how about you point that blame at your fellow longshanks? We will fight to the end if we trust you, because trust and play and creativity are important. Some of us might even be your friend if you let us, but if your name sucks, you're getting a new one. A name is supposed to be short enough to yell and taste good to say. It should also be rhymable, because we make so many songs out of everything. Some of us, like yours truly, have been slowly making our way into society, though a lot of us don't want to because you're confusing. Like, what's with all these rules? Even liking a god has rules. We'll worship monsters, big trees, our best friend, the concept of bugs. Just like something cool. At least we can all understand Cade and Kaylee. Get drunk, beat up slavers, and don't let people tell you what to do. That we can get behind. We're dexterous and charismatic and see in the dark, but not the most observant. Note that I didn't say not the most durable, because we only have 6 HP, but we are quite resilient. Unbreakable goblins are as tough as a dwarf and take less damage when they fall. Some of us resist fire or cold or being sick and sickened. Some of us can climb or have tails or giant teeth to chomp with the force of a short sword. One of the new ones even has illusions, because they're always finding more of us. Of course, we have plenty to enhance our heritage. Forget resisting fall damage when you can just bounce when hitting the ground or someone hits you. Set yourself on fire for more damage. Eat people, slow them with ice. Of course, we have the classic being a menace stuff, like ripping things apart or distracting you by singing really loudly about how dumb you are. And being scrappy is the name of our game, scuttling around and under people, kneecapping, or being very sneaky. Or very, very sneaky because our names make sense, like Loud Singer or Burn It. But of course, if we somehow make it to level 17, there's only one explanation. We're as lucky as they get, because minions don't make it that far. With Reckless Abandon, we can pick a turn to succeed on every check and make all damage against us roll 1. When the going gets tough, our greatest heroes just run through everything and bite your face. As long as it's fun, we can be anything. Be a champion of your personal god of cool rocks and shiny things. I get some of my magic from my little snail squiggles. And maybe you're a fellow heretic getting magic from reading. Though honestly, a picture spellbook would be amazing. And with that, I have decided that this is your S tier. Currently, it's an A for me because I'm a goblin all the time and games are a chance to try something new. But being a goblin is also the best, so it's hard to resist the siren call. Anyway, we finish up with the other classic green creature, the orc. Glad to see you in the core, buddy, especially with the glow up. They get the human style 2 free bonuses because they're versatile, and they're tied with a dwarf for the highest starting HP at 10. They can also see in the dark, but most interesting is how they do the violent warrior thing. The classic orcish wisdom is that you are the scars that shape you. Glory and pain mean everything to an orc, but you need to learn from the pain and share that knowledge. Surviving a fight is just as glorious and honored as winning, as long as you fought well and don't complain about the pain. They're raised communally in a might makes right society because this time most are fighting for a cause. The other classic orcish saying is that if it has a face and a name, it can be killed. They don't worship gods, they hunt them. In orc religion, if you're badass enough, you can fight the gods and take their throne. Their pantheon is a hit list. Now all that said, orc beliefs and taboos are all incredibly varied. It keeps them separated, but sometimes lets them get along fine with other ancestries like humans. And an orc on your side is about as loyal and honest as it gets. First and foremost, they're survivors, and infighting without reason gets everyone killed, especially the horrible terrible places they tend to live. That's why they're strong and why they bite. Also to kill God, that's very important. Those harsh environments shape them, letting them ignore weather effects or be great at climbing or navigating or resisting disease. Some are great at intimidation or especially hard to kill, and a few resist void damage and death effects. It's from undead exposure, they really hate undead. Not that it really matters for beats, as those have 3 main lines. Well, really 2. They can train and improve animals, but there's 2 big ones. One is superstition, defend against magic, heal from it, make magic masks for knowledge or resistance or even spells. But the biggest by far is just fighting, making attacks bleed, more speed, even temporary HP from killing. But most importantly is their refusal to die. Orc ferocity is the most prevalent feat. If you hit 0, mark 1 wound and stay on your feet. Other feats build on this to let them give it to animals, do this more often, gain temporary HP, and make you harder to kill when you don't have it. Their pinnacle ability actually requires it and lets you make a free attack when you use it. If that kills, you can use it again. I say this all to emphasize that if you're an orc, you are hard to take down. I haven't talked about classes so far because I believe that anyone can do anything, but if you want a fighting character of any sort, these are great. A monk who's a noble boxer, a druid who becomes their companion and goes on a rampage. Maybe you're a battlecaster, an oracle of the concept of killing gods. There is so much flavor packed into this thing. It's easily an A tier, but a personal B thanks to my undying need to be small. Also their hatred of undead, which I'm obligated to oppose. If you love the idea of constantly shrugging off death or only getting stronger as you get close to it, the orc is amazing. Now before we wrap this up, I know it doesn't seem like it, but I usually really hate being negative. I'm sarcastic and petty, but I don't really like being mean unless warranted. I don't usually redo even a page of these scripts, but I redid this whole thing like 5 times. I just kept complaining about D&D's version because crossing these systems is a channel theme, but comparing them was just mean because it's not a focus. Look at the human. A couple of skills, an extra feat is an optional variant, and the new one gets both with a daily reroll. And while the original description is more like Pathfinder's, the new one has only 5 admittedly large sentences. That's a cool summary, but Pathfinder also has that before explaining everything else too. And all the options, customizations, it really all comes down to one thing. In D&D you say you're a goblin alchemist because you want them to picture you in their head. In Pathfinder you say you're a goblin alchemist because no matter the context, the goblin part probably matters and keeps mattering. And I know it's a personal preference, but I like something as important as what I am to matter. Just like my Cobby supporters, Feral Goblin, Snake Oil, Modern Masquerade, Level 1 Cleric, and Dr. Mud. Thanks for all the help with things like my new equipment. I finally got this thing up and running. A friend gifted me spare parts and helped me get the rest for cheaper. I'll still be paying it off for a few months, but oh well. It was needed and will really help. It was 9 years old and struggling with editing, though honestly the important part is that thanks to this, I can get the occasional privacy in a little storage room home office. Thanks to my living situation, I've been set up in the middle of the living room, screens exposed, with someone else set up 5 feet away and pointed my direction. Even without the movement and sound, as someone who is raised going days without human contact, it's been overstimulating. Or to not break the fourth wall, we've been running the show out of random classrooms not in use, editing in the break room or on the clock at the coffee shop. This lets me do a little editing at home, even if recording might be just as janky. Can't take school property back to my hut. Now I do have a lot of maintenance to catch up on, but afterwards, if this nets me enough free time, I have some interesting new ideas. We'll hopefully talk about that more in April. But for now, thanks for watching and class dismissed. I will now be doing a dramatic reading of the Goblin song. Goblins chew and goblins bite. Goblins cut and goblins bite. Stab the dog and cut the horse. Goblins eat and take by force. Goblins race and goblins jump. Goblins slash and goblins bump. Burn the skin and mash the head. Goblins hear and you be dead. Chase the baby, catch the pup, bonk the head to shut it up. Bones be cracked, flesh be stewed. We be goblins, you be... We be goblins, you be food.